a belated apology for those calling from far away, like Australia this morning. I want to really welcome you all for this G3ict innovation briefing session. Today the topic is about accessibility in the cloud, and I hope that you all got the PowerPoint presentation that we sent before the meeting started today. Two technical details. You can actually look at the captions for this workshop on the link that is posted on the first slide of the slideshow. That will be opening up in the browser window. Also, if you have questions, please send them by email to questions@g3ict.org. We are monitoring all the questions this morning, and so we'll be more than happy to actually insert those questions during the presentation when our colleagues from IBM will be going into more details. So with that, I would like to go to slide number 2, which is the agenda for today. We will actually look at who participates in the call today, very briefly, introductions. We will look at the briefing objectives, talk about the importance of HTML and EPUB3, and of course introduce the IBM accessibility innovations that leverage the cloud technology, and then of course question and answers. So this morning, if you go to slide number 3, we are happy to welcome actually 120. We had 6 more participants registered since yesterday, coming from a bit all over the world. So it's a good sign that this accessibility topic is really gaining tremendous traction and momentum everywhere. And your participation is a testimony to that. Slide number 4 will give you quickly an overview of the diversity of organizations that are participating today, from industry, academia, civil society. It's a very impressive list of organizations. Slide number 5, I want to briefly introduce the speakers this morning. So we have, first of all, I am Axel Lebois, and I'm the moderator this morning, the president and founder of G3ict, the global initiative for inclusive technologies. We have then Brian McDonald, who is the president of Braille, National Braille Press.
Larry Goldberg.
Then we'll have from IBM, Christine Banke, who is a senior advisor for IBM Accessibility, which is part of IBM Research, and Tom Brunette, who is senior software engineer, also with the IBM Accessibility division and part of IBM Research. Both of them very involved in the development of those tools, which would be a great opportunity this morning for an open discussion. Slide number 6, briefing objective. We really would like to introduce the notion of having a digital content checker on the cloud, which could bring tremendous benefits to content developers all over the world. We would like to actually offer the opportunity to all persons who are joining us today to be beta users of that system and provide feedback to the IBM accessibility team. And most importantly, we would like to discuss possible application areas and how the promotion of tools could be actually pushed forward to make it a more mainstream type of process. Slide number 7, that would actually show you the background on G3ict and who we are. We were formed back in 2006 upon the adoption of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities at the United Nations. Our job is to promote innovation and the globalized harmonized accessibility framework for the accessibility of information and communication technologies, which is actually one of the most important and innovative mandates of the Convention. And we, since inception, do this with strong support from the ICT industry itself, UN agencies, organizations of persons with disabilities, governments, and standard development organizations. So we are truly a multi-stakeholder organization, and our job in life is to bridge different stakeholders to actually make progress in promoting innovation. The relevance today of the topic for us is that we all know that end-user devices, operating systems, and applications have made super progress in providing accessibility features. While this is really spreading, including with mobile platforms on a very large scale, unfortunately, inaccessible content remain a major challenge. And that's why HTML and EPUB3 are such important international guidelines and standards that we wish to promote at G3ict as everybody else. And so being able to use innovative tools to check the accessibility of HTML and EPUB3 content as content developers operate is really critical to the success long-term of developing accessible content. So this briefing hopefully will facilitate the discussion, and our main hope is that after this call, quite a few among your attendees today will actually be collaborating or providing feedback to our IBM colleagues who are developing those tools to see how we can make support. So with that, on slide number 9, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Brian McDonald from National Braille Press. Brian has a tremendous experience in the space of accessible digital content. So, Brian, with that, thank you very much for joining us this morning and providing your feedback. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. As we all know, we're living in a technology revolution that's transforming our world faster than any other era in mankind's history. If we drill down specifically to e-content, for education, leisure, and the workplace, you'll hear today about how the cloud and specific open source markup languages such as HTML5 and EPUB3 can deliver web and mobile content and ebooks across multiple platforms and devices. And thanks to these efforts of W3C to recommend these worldwide adoption of these standards, they're taking hold. However, we have a history of older ebooks that have not been as accessible for people with disabilities. Publishers and content providers began this transformation from print to the digital world over the last number of years, but their efforts have been fragmented with multiple proprietary formats to create these ebooks. And unfortunately, the end result is that the level of accessibility has been also inconsistent during this period. We certainly need to educate the content producers to understand how we can help them deliver better quality, accessible ebooks that everyone benefits from, not just people with a print disability or some other limitation. And there are 5 main publishing categories that we look at: the mainstream publishers, the subsegment of the textbook publishers, authors themselves, accessible content producers, and educators. My organization, National Braille Press, is an accessible publisher and producer of books and original content for the blind and low vision market. We certainly know that the most important part to making any book accessible starts at the beginning of that pipeline, so the content is born accessible, not an afterthought. And we really need to emphasize that to all publishers and content producers today. You will find out today how these tools benefit everyone, including web developers and marketers, even on the fly as content's being created. And that's what I think is really exciting, that these tools provide that capability. And publishers can also repair older content easily with these exciting advancements. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Brian. And this really shows the high level of expectation that those new type of tools is raising among publishers who already are committed to accessibility. So thank you so much for your introductory remark. If you can all go to slide number 10, I would like now to give the floor to Christine Banke, who will actually tell us more about the IBM approach to using the cloud for accessibility checking. Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Axel, and G3ict for providing this forum to speak with all of you today. And thanks to Brian McDonald and to the audience for taking the time to join us. First, I'd like to mention that this is an accessible deck, but if we overlooked anything, please don't hesitate to send us an email in the spirit of improvement, And we will also have a transcript post-session that will be available. On page 10, I'd like to begin by elaborating on Axel's and Brian's introductory remarks about the importance of HTML and EPUB. The key point is by embracing HTML and EPUB, you will enable content developers to provide the optimum accessibility to readers of all abilities. You know, as mentioned, both HTML and EPUB are international guidelines and standards respectively, and by design promote large adoption of the technologies. As you know, HTML is the web's core language for creating documents and applications, and EPUB is built on HTML, which is a free open standard offered by the International Digital Publishing Forum. EPUB is the most widely supported vendor-independent ebook format and supported by the largest number of hardware readers, including Amazon Kindle Fire, and software readers, including iBooks on Apple devices and Google Books on Android. And then lastly, EPUB accessibility features are a considerable competitive advantage for IBM as well as organizations as accessibility requirements in all countries, expand in all countries, for example, in the education industry, which we think is going to be pivotal. On page 11, a reminder to please send your questions via email to questions@g3ict.org, and these questions are being monitored during the briefing.
I have a few questions, Christine, if you'd like me to share some of the initial questions we are getting.
Sure.
So I do have quite a few persons who are asking about EPUB editors and that produce accessible files, and especially tools that produce those files with what you see is what you get type of approach.
Yes.
The second group of questions I'm getting pretty high. Many people are asking what level of skills would be required to actually use those tools integrated in the workflow. In other terms, is it really complicated to integrate those tools in the workflow? And that's a very high level of interest, I think, among participants.
Okay.
I also have a question which comes from Richard Steinberg from the Texas Department of Health Services, which asks, can you possibly have other type of files, such as elements being checked for accessibility, such as ASPX? So those are the initial questions that we are getting today. I've got a couple of others, but they are more, I think, in tune with the remaining of the presentation. So I will let you continue, Christine.
Okay, so Axel, I'm sorry. Do you want me to briefly answer those questions, or should we tee them up to the end?
It's really up to you. You can do either or.
Okay, I'll be very brief in the spirit of time, but we can talk in more detail at the end. So, with regards to what you see, what you get, EPUB editors, it's somewhat out of the scope of what this webinar is about. As we're discussing the accessibility testing of the EPUB documents, not the generation of the documents themselves. However, we have found the teams focused on building EPUBs are part of packaging processes, and these full what you see, what you get editors that generate EPUB are not as common. There are a number of resources available, easily located on the web, that talk about the different software vendors that produce EPUB docs, but we don't endorse any particular vendor product. With regards to the ease of use of the tool, Tom will demonstrate later how easy it is to use, and we'll also speak to there's two parts to the question, the user interface and then the integration into your own processes, and Tom will speak to that later.
Totally.
So let me return to the presentation, and I'm on page 12.
Reader.
Which is accessibility in the cloud. And this is really why we're here today, which is to talk about IBM's inception of cloud services for accessibility. It provides a rationale why accessibility in the cloud matters. Obviously, it increases availability of accessibility tools and therefore reducing barriers to content. And in doing so, it lowers total cost of ownership through really a high-volume business model. It can accelerate the time of your development operations by integrating into your current processes and not taking on accessibility after the fact, after the code is developed or the books are published. Further, it reflects or embraces a responsive web design. This is really important to understand, which is a design principle which enables seamless transition of user experience to multiple devices, whether it be laptop, desktop, smartphone, or tablet, or whatever device the future will
I'll
bring.
look at the recording later. I just find it really interesting.
And lastly, it helps organizations conform to standards and regulations more easily.
How you doing?
I'm afraid to come to you.
On page 13, moving to page 13, let's talk about the business case for providing these tools and organizations using these tools.
You don't have a thing to do with it. Her reaction to the world.
First, the business of web and mobile apps are exploding, so the market is huge, and it's paramount to provide easy solutions for addressing regulatory requirements and therefore increasing market opportunities. Accessibility remediation of applications after the fact are estimated to be an additional 15% cost versus fixing it during the development process. Further, these solutions enable integrated continuous delivery in the application development process, not a kludgy, disparate tool requirement for content or developers or coders to be encumbered with. And finally, the point of using and leveraging open standards and technology is that it promotes universal access, again, enabling broader adoption, which you'll see is a theme of the advantage of accessibility in the cloud.
Just a second, I'll tell you.
The list on page 14 represents the type of personas or users of the tool that would find these tools relevant to their jobs. The people that you might seek but are not limited to are content developers for websites and mobile apps, information architects, user experience designers and developers, education course developers, publishers, marketers, and, of course, accessibility specialists. So on page 15, we talked about the cloud earlier and why it's beneficial to organizations.
I want to go about the bank and with the rent.
Well, Bluemix is IBM's version of a cloud offering. It's an open standards cloud platform built on
page 18.
Okay, thank you.
But
again, open source technology for building, running, and managing applications. And it comes with the intent to make application development easier. And because Bluemix is a PaaS, or platform as a service offering, it handles everything but the code and data. That is, no longer do organizations have to contend with the traditional infrastructure layers of technology such as computer servers, operating systems, disk storage, networks, operating systems, middleware, etc. On page 16, here's where I introduce IBM's accessibility tools for the cloud. First, let me make mention of AAT, or Automated Accessibility Tester, on the left side of the page. It integrates with the open source test framework Selenium, which is an agile development test product, thus often used for automated testing and continuous delivery practices. Selenium has almost become an industry de facto standard. It's in such use. AAT adds accessibility testing and reporting capabilities in the Selenium framework and process. Okay? DCC, or Digital Content Checker, which is illustrated on the right side of the page, which is the main subject of today's call, it provides user interfaces to test HTML or EPUB documents. It utilizes the same engine and rules as Automatic Accessibility Tester for consistency. And if you choose to use the API, or Application Programming Interface, it enables developers to add accessibility testing into their own content management systems and workflows and build their own, optionally, build their own user interfaces versus using IBM's Bluemix user interface. And lastly, both tools check against WCAG 2 AA or IBM's rule set, which includes WCAG 2 AA, as well as rich Internet application checks to ensure the accessibility of the app. So again, on page 17, a moment to remind you to send your questions via email to questions@g3ict.org, and I am now going to turn it over to my colleague Tom Brunet.
Christine, just a quick logistic thing. If participants can ensure that they can mute their phones, normally the system does mute everyone, but it doesn't work this morning as expected. So if you have a conversation going on near the phone, please mute your phone. Thank you so much. So Tom, I guess the floor is yours to continue the conversation. We received quite a few questions, so we keep them for the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. So on slide 18, as Christine mentioned, Bluemix has a nice platform as a service offering that's built on Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry isn't the entire offering for Bluemix, but that's part of it, at least, and a very big part of it. Slide 18, showing a on slide 18, there's a screenshot of a Bluemix console.
Line muted.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
We can, Tom. Somebody took that background music.
So this is a screenshot of a Bluemix application, Cloud Foundry application deployed. So it's a sample application, and you'll see here on the top, it's a Java application, and you can do this with Node.js or a number of different other types of platforms, but this particular one is a Java Liberty application. And what you do in Bluemix is you can add various different services. So there's things like speech-to-text engines and text-to-speech. There's image recognition, various Watson components. There's services for helping you scale and monitor your application. So the two services that Christine introduced, the Automated Accessibility Tester and Digital Content Checker, are two of those services. So you can, through this dashboard, you can add those two services. They're in the experimental labs catalog on Bluemix right now. And when you add them into your space, you're provisioned an instance of that space that's for your use, and anyone that's a member of your organization or space inside of Bluemix. Once that service is added into your space, you have access to it, and you have a REST API and credentials, or you can come in through the web interface that we'll show you in a minute. The applications are given nice programmatic access to it, so they can sort of self-discover the service and directly access that content. So that's just to give you a brief overview of the environment that we're working in here. You can also access this from apps outside of Bluemix, but it just makes it a lot easier if you are working in Bluemix. On slide 19, this is what I mentioned was there's a sample web interface that's provided. So we use the same REST service to build this web interface that's provided that you can use in your own systems. So if you were building your own app, you could essentially rebuild this application if you wanted to. So when you start, you are allowed to pick a file from your file system that you wish to scan. So we provide any sort of HTML-based document or EPUB document. And so those HTML documents, referring back to the question that Axel brought up about ASPX, if the ASPX is a full HTML document, then we will scan it. If it's a partially generated piece of HTML, you may get inconsistent results because the document's not complete. So in any case, if you can capture a completed, compiled, full HTML document, you can scan it with the system. So you'd first choose your file, and then you choose from one of these two reports. So the two reports, the first one is a WCAG 2.0 AA report. The second one is labeled as an IBM accessibility rule set, and it includes all of those WCAG 2.0 AA rules, but we also have a number of rules around ARIA. So it will make sure that content is within ARIA landmarks. It will make sure that all of your ARIA widgets are using consistent properties for the roles that you have defined. So there's a lot of extra checking that's on top of WCAG 2.0 in the IBM accessibility rule set. In some cases, that may not make sense for content. It sort of depends on your situation as to which of these two reports you wish to use. So once you submit your file, on slide 20, this is a sample report that you would receive back. it has a number of different features in the report. On the left, you'll see that there's a summary of the number of violations, potential violations, recommendations, and manual checks that have been identified. And each of these has a checkbox with it so that you can turn on and off the different properties. So if you wanted to focus on just the violations, you could turn everything else off. If you wanted to focus on just the recommendations, you could do that. So that gives you some control over what you see. And then in the main report, there's a breakdown by page of the EPUB, in the case of EPUB documents, or it will just be one large report for an HTML file. So you'll see, in this particular case, it looks like
Sarah.
In this particular EPUB that I scanned has an accessibility issue related to skip links and landmarks. So each of the individual issues, if you expand it, you'll get information to help you identify where the issue is. So this particular sample, we didn't have a line number, but we typically give you both a line number and an XPath in that file. And we give you information about which checkpoint of the standard that it violated. So you can expand each of these different issues, figure out which page it is, where the issue is, and go directly to that page and line number to find out how to fix it. And also with each of these, there's a description of help, and I'll show you an example of that on the next slide in a moment. If this particular report format doesn't work for you, or if you need to capture this and send it to someone, or you need to filter it in various different ways, you can also download it as a CSV file, which is essentially a spreadsheet. So you can open that up in, say, OpenOffice or Excel, and then you can do your filtering as needed from there. So there's lots of flexibility in how you work with these reports and how you get to them. On slide 21, as I said, there's a sample help documentation. We try to provide at least a title, rationale, some links off to the standards, and then examples in various cases. So we'll try to help developers that aren't familiar with these various different accessibility rules to understand what the issue is and how to fix it. So you don't necessarily have to go digging in through all of the WCAG2 techniques to figure out what the problem is and how to fix it. So we try to summarize each individual issue and how to fix it here. On slide 22, there's a documentation provided with the service for using the service as a REST API. At the bottom of this slide, there is a URL that will bring you directly to this page. And when you first get to this page, it may look like it's empty, but the default section here is just hidden. So if you expand that default section, you'll get into all the different REST API calls that you can make. And if you expand these further, you'll get information about what the parameters are and sample calls, what they would look like. So what you can do with this API is you can get the list of policies that we support. So WCAG and the IBM rule set are part of that listing. And then we have various endpoints for allowing you to submit EPUB files or HTML files either by forms or other REST API methods, so that you can integrate this into any application or workflow that you have. So we provide, like I said, there's that sample HTML user interface that uses this REST API itself. So anything that we're doing with that interface, you can do also in your own applications if you desire. So slide 23, this is just a sampling of things that you can integrate the Digital Content Checker with. A typical content editing workflow has a number of different touch points. So it maybe you start with a rich text editor, or you're starting with some sort of IDE environment where you're doing your editing wherever that is. You could, if it's a customizable environment, you can add some checking. And I'll show an example of that in the next slide of an editor environment that we used, that we added checking into. But that would be just one touch point that you might be able to add it into. And then as people are finished editing their content, typically there's some sort of review process. So it may come from an author who submits it, goes through some set of reviewers who review the content, maybe send comments back to the author and go back and forth. So often there's some sort of custom workflow for publishing. And in each of those steps, you could provide checking and provide feedback to the reviewers. We don't dictate what your publishing process is or what your publishing policies are, but we allow you to use the accessibility feedback to make decisions as part of that process. So we've had teams within IBM who have wanted to block content from publishing if it has any violations. We've had teams that they want to assess it and see if there's anything overly important that an accessibility expert would review and then potentially kick it back to the author. So there's different teams have different requirements as to how they treat content, how they treat violations, and that can be built into custom workflows. And then the other very large user of our is our information development teams. So every app that we deploy has has help documentation. There's services that have large constants of documentation. Hardware that goes out has specs that get published with the hardware. And so IBM has been moving all this documentation from PDF formats into EPUB formats. And so those build processes are building that documentation along with the application or as part of the solution deployment. And so what they do is as part of that build process, they kick off a scan that goes through the directory of content. And in their case, it's all static HTML, so it's very suitable for this type of checking. So it'll walk through the directory and submit each page to the service and build a large report that they can assess if there's any issues in the publishing process. So in some cases, it may be issues that that goes all the way back to the original text editor, but in other cases, there's some issue with the packaging and build process. So they need to go contact the packaging and build team to get that fixed. So there's lots of these different touch points that you can ensure that there's some quality checking in your pipeline and ensure that all of your content's accessible. And the nice thing about this is that every one of these different pieces can submit the content in the same way, get the same report. And so you don't have arguments between the build team and the workflow team and the editors and the authors over to whose tool is giving the right answer, because they should all provide the same results. On slide 24, as I said, this is a sample that we built for editing or adding our service into a rich text editor. This particular screenshot is of CK Editor. There are other text editors out there that are web-based and provide customization, but this was one of the early ones that we had access to. So in this case, there's a bit of sample content in there that just shows a table that doesn't have headings on it, and there's an image in there that doesn't have alt text. And so when the author, in this case, decides that they want to do their accessibility check, they can press a button on the toolbar and it submits it off to the Digital Content Checker. And the report that comes back as part of the CK Editor plugin, we generate a dialog that shows all of the issues. So in this case, you'll see that they detected the image that needs alt text and the data table that's missing headings. And the other thing that's nice about this is that since we know in the report as part of the REST service, we know what the XPath is, we know what the issue is, we can provide some guidance to help them fix it. So in this case that data table is what's at fault, and you know that it's having a heading problem. So you can write some code to prompt them to say, okay, well, is this table for presentation? Does it have row headers, column headers? And they can make the selection. And since this is an HTML and JavaScript editor that's customizable, you can take those changes and make them for them. So there's lots of possibilities here for automating and guiding people for different types of fixing issues. So on that, I believe it's I pass off to Axel again. Gene.
Axel? Well, it's Christine Bank again. Let me take this on page 25. These are just kind of showcasing a couple of early use testimonials. Brian spoke with us earlier, and we also had some, pretty good press from Media Access in Australia. That's on page 25. On 26, we're kind of summarizing the benefit of promoting the adoption of accessibility in the cloud. And clearly, the more integration with applications, the better, as Tom just articulated so well. And checking accessibility should not translate into loss of productivity. You don't want to have post-production revisions for accessibility issues. It's very costly and inefficient. It's important to follow leading accessibility standards. And, of course, the cloud-based tool allows for automatic updates of rules. That's a benefit that we haven't mentioned. That's a huge benefit. And the availability of the tool anywhere and anytime. And on page 27, we're identifying a call to action to the audience. We're asking that you solicit your key people based on the user types, and then provide them this deck and pointers to this page, steps 3 to 5 to get started. So the first thing is to create an IBM ID. Okay, you follow the links provided here. It's very straightforward. And then add the Digital Content Checker to your Bluemix space. Again, Tom spoke about this. And you can go and get more information. There's some links at the bottom of the page, which is a nicely done video and demo that's available to really, it's a really good place to get started to, get down to the basics of what's available. On page 28, I think we're opening the floor for Q&A. We're also pointing out on this page post presentation today. There's a couple links here where you can submit further questions and other comments on the adoption of these tools. There's 2 links there. One's developer.ibm.com, Bluemix found support, and then there's ibm.com/able, which is our website. So I thank you for your attention, and I want to open the floor to see if there's any questions that we might be able to answer for you. And Axel, we appreciate you serving as moderator. Axel, we can't hear you.
We did receive quite a few questions during your presentation. Can you hear me?
It sounds like you're in the next room.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We did receive quite a few questions during the presentation, and we sorted them out by categories. So one question that came up was about the Bluemix accessibility itself. Could you possibly comment on the accessibility of the Bluemix tool and the Bluemix interface?
Yeah. Todd, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so as we noted, that the Bluemix is built off of a number of open source offerings. So there are, in the web UI, there are admittedly issues. The team has a priority to get that fixed at least by the end of next year. So there's definitely an emphasis on getting that fixed. However, there's also a command line option. A number of our blind colleagues have been using Bluemix and are successful in doing so using the command line interface. And you can pretty much do anything that you can do in the web interface using the command line. It may not be the best situation, but it's definitely something that is getting fixed and worked on.
Thank you, Tom. And the second type of question I got was, and maybe it's premature because you are really in beta mode right now, but there was a question about the cost of high volume checking with the new offering that you are preparing.
Right. So the pricing model has not yet been settled. Right now it's an experimental service, so all the checking is free. So I don't know if you mean cost as far as dollars or cost in terms of time, but in terms of dollars at the moment, all the checking is free.
Well, I think the cost in dollars was the nature of the question.
Yeah. So this is Christine. Just to reiterate, Axel, let me play back what I think I heard you say. The question came from the audience about the cost of using the tool. Yes. Is that correct? Okay. Just to reiterate what Tom was saying, we do not have approved pricing yet, but it's coming in. Our proposals that are pending approval are coming in, at less than $1.
Okay, well that's probably the answer that our audience was looking for.
Yeah, and right now it's in experimental. We're seeking to determine if there's interest, if there's a market for it. So
right, that's the nature of this code, is to ensure
that's right.
You can communicate with persons who are interested to participate in your beta phase, which is very advanced kind of usage for this new type of tools. Another question we got was, would the tools, the checkers that you have designed, be available on other type of cloud environments?
All right, so the service just utilizes, as I said, it's a REST API. So for your particular instance, you're given a URL and some credentials. So you can access that API from essentially anywhere, as long as it's able to see Bluemix. So, as I said, it makes it easier if you're building a Bluemix app, because those credentials can be programmatically discovered and kind of built in at runtime. But from any other cloud offering, you could include that into the URI and the credentials into your build process or in a config file or hard code it, however you want to manage that, and you can access that service from any other offering also.
And then we have questions that are more related to the type of errors that the tool would actually catch. And there are two types of different questions which have come up in fairly large numbers. One is, do you, for like complex situations, especially for engineering schools or books or EPUBs with tables, technical information, diagrams, is that something that the tool can deal with?
So the rules behind it, there's several hundred, so I can't go through kind of a full listing. But it's a set of rules that in IBM we've been using for all of our content and all of our applications. We try to focus on things that are more reliable in automation as violations. We in the past have had issues with tools that trigger anything that might possibly be a violation as a violation, and then our development teams end up chasing these issues for long periods of time just to find out that there's nothing really wrong. So we take a lot of interest in ensuring that things that are violations are things that can be automatically detected, things that are potential violations. They're definitely in the standard, but maybe things that you need a little bit more assessment to. So that's just a statement about how we classify things. We poured through all the WCAG 2 standards. We've been working in this space for a couple decades. Worked on web browsers for the blind 15 years ago and more. So we have a lot of experience in what the issues are and what web developers are needing to fix. As far as more technical things, definitely tables we check. When it gets into graphs and MathML, our team is working on adding things in for SVG, but that part is not in there yet. So as as we move forward, as we end up developing more of this checking for IBM, that checking will also be pushed out into these tools as well. So as you can imagine, the work that we do in IBM is fairly technical as well. So I think it would fit well with many of those environments.
Thank you. Another question that's related, but with a different angle, and several participants asked, if the tools, and I assume the answer is yes, because you follow the WCAG rules, but can you maybe expand a little bit on the different type of barriers that different persons with disabilities will experience? And so, basically going through cognitive, visual, hearing, speech impairments, and those type of kind of approach to looking at what is inaccessible.
Yeah, so the WCAG guidelines, many people look at them, and there's certainly more in there for people who are blind and a little, and people with visual impairments. But the guidelines also have a number of things in there for cognitive impairments and deaf. And sometimes it's not obvious that it applies to certain usage scenarios, but overall the guidelines improve the accessibility for everyone. So the techniques, things like ensuring that your color contrast is high, that may be for people who have visual impairments, but it's also for people to improve the readability and can help with cognitive issues as well. So it's hard to say from a rule by rule basis. There's lots of rules and lots of different scenarios. Many of these cross barriers. The overall guidance, though, is that the rules do check what's in the HTML. So in cases where the issue is something that's outside of the actual document, we can't check that. So, for instance, there's often questions about whether or not we can check whether or not the media player that's kicked off by the document has captioning. So we can't look into that third-party tool because we don't know how that third-party tool works, which one they're using, and so forth. So there are limitations on the reach of the engine. But if it's in the HTML and if it's something that's referred to by WCAG or something that we're finding even from our employees that they're having issues with, we try to add checks for anything that we can find that can help.
So, Tom, related to this question, Kartik Dobala from Texas A&M Information Technology Group is asking a question: what kind of guide does Bluemix has regarding manual testing? And also, since Bluemix rule set has ARIA guidelines, are there any measures to ensure that it's not overused? And maybe also another related question: can specific additional organizations rule set be added to the checker, to the tool you currently have?
Okay, can you state the first question again?
Yeah, the first question is what kind of guide does Bluemix has regarding manual testing? And the second question is about the ARIA guidelines, and the third one is about the need to add additional rules to the rules that you're already using.
Yeah, so there are a number of prompts for manual checks that are returned by the engine, and each of those has some help documentation associated with it to help you understand what it is and what you need to do. But this engine really does focus more on the automated side of testing. We want our developers to be able to detect all the, our content developers and managers to be able to detect all the issues that engines automatically can detect. There's lots of stuff out there that you need to do manual testing for still, like making sure that your readability is good and so forth. That we may not have 100% coverage on the manual testing, but that's not really the focus of the engine. As far as overusage of ARIA, again, we use ARIA heavily within IBM. So we do try to steer developers to use it correctly. So we do have rules that look to see if you're using ARIA when the element's already providing the appropriate roles. We do try to make sure that all of this works with screen readers, and we have cases where we'll look at what the common browsers are and what the technology supports, and sometimes we'll offer guidance to use ARIA in ways that may not necessarily meet the spec, but actually improve the accessibility of the application at the current point in time. And we phase these out as as JAWS adds support and as the web browsers add support. So we make sure that people are using the technologies properly. And then the third question, can you reiterate again?
Yeah, the third question, actually, if I can go back just one sec to the previous questions, because we went to another question we received into that. But let me go to my list of questions here. The last part of the question was about adding specific rules that an organization may have, like a university or an enterprise, that could be added to the WCAG 2.0 and the IBM rule set that you're using in the tool.
Right. So the technology supports various different reports, and it's fairly easy to add. But as far as the Bluemix services at this time, we're not exposing that. So we're maintaining the rule sets at this time. That may be something that if we get enough queries for that, and we'll look into that further as to how we can maybe expose that capability.
And then I wanted to also forward a question from Professor Derek Cockburn from the Institute on Disability and Public Policy at American University. He's asking, long-term, is your strategy to push these tools as a commercial tool to be licensed, or is it more like possibly an open source approach to accessibility in the cloud?
I think I'll let Christine answer that one.
Yeah. So, well, nothing is out of bounds in terms of what we might do, but we are hoping to commercialize it.
And then I don't know if Brian is still available to answer questions. Brian, are you on the line? Maybe not. So in any case, there was a question on the prevalence of accessible publishing today. In other terms, there was a sense that we don't really know what percentage of the market or the publishing industry is actually already lining up with accessibility guidelines, if you will. And so that's a more general question, but I think it's a question of high interest, especially to academic institutions.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, quite frankly, I think it's a very delicate thing because it's a brand new field that is just emerging now to implement EPUB3 standard. But I think long term we need to look at making sure that especially education institutions have a way to actually assess which publishers actually are producing accessible ebooks and or not. So that's maybe something that is in the background of many of the questions we are getting today.
I might add one comment. IBM had announced that we're moving a lot of our product documentation over from PDF to EPUB. PDF files technically can be made accessible, but at least for our purposes, we found that doing so is often impractical, either because of the tools that are necessary or the process involved. So we've been taking a very hard approach to move all of that documentation over to EPUB because it's a format that's it's based on HTML. It's built on technologies that are easy to edit and easy to make accessible. So I think a number of other publishers are going to find that if they need to meet accessibility standards, they're going to have to move to formats like EPUB.
So I think we are reaching the end of our hour for this call, and I really appreciate so many people staying on the line and asking all those questions. Maybe Tom and Christine, if you don't mind, just summing up in a few words, what are your main hopes, after this call in terms of collaboration with users who will be interested to provide feedback? Christine? Yep.
So, so we just wanted to say, thank you, and that your feedback does matter in terms of the proliferation of accessible EPUBs and HTML going forward. And again, if you have any further questions or comments, please forward them to the URLs on slide 28. Thank you very much.
And Tom?
Sorry, I think Christine followed up pretty well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both very, very much for this very comprehensive presentation. And again, thank you for the attendees who spent this hour with us today. Following the webinar, we will actually send a little summary to everyone. We really appreciate your time very much. I think it's an intriguing new step towards promoting accessible content. And thank you for the IBM team for allowing for that discussion. And we hope that you will have great success in getting all those tools on the cloud, so that long term checking accessibility will become easy and mainstream in all phases of publishing. So thank you all, and we will look forward to your comments and feedback. Thank you. Bye-bye.